So anyway, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn session on prenatal exome sequencing. So I'm very pleased that we've got four brilliant speakers. We've got Kasia, Gajewska, Knapik, who's prenatal lead for the GMSA and consultant obstetrician and a subspecialist in fetal maternal medicine at Cambridge. Lauren Capacchione, who's a senior midwifery project lead, Fetomaternal medicine, deputy fetal medicine midwife at East and North Herts. And we've got Fleur Marie Gilbertson, who's lead fetal medicine midwife at Cambridge University Hospitals, and Anita Davis, who's information officer, family support at Unique. So and also I haven't introduced myself, I always forget to do that. I'm Annette Green, I'm one of the lead nurses for the East GMSA. So if you could all go on mute, and unless you're speaking, if you wouldn't mind switching your camera off, because that sort of affects the quality of the recording. So Kasia, I shall hand over to you.
Lovely. My name is Kasia Gajewska-Knapik. I'm consultant in obstetrics and subspecialist in maternal and fetal medicine in Cambridge. And I'll provide an overview of prenatal exome sequencing. As it happens, I've got too many slides, so I'll go through some of them. And then if anyone has got questions, you can catch up with me later. Prenatal diagnosis is possible thanks to two really mainstreams in science, one being interrogation of fetal phenotype and development of the techniques, ultrasound, MRI and other techniques, and interrogation of genomic material. Both these mainstreams affect each other, obviously, because if we have got abnormalities on the ultrasound, then we want to find out what the genetic makeup of the baby is. And on the other side, if we have genetic abnormalities, we look in the baby for abnormalities which would represent these changes. Patient journey for fetal medicine hasn't changed that much over the years. It starts from detection of some abnormalities on ultrasound, then offering of invasive testing and obtaining some of the material which represents the baby, interrogation of this material to find genetic changes, and then multidisciplinary team involvement, including patient with discussion and planning management. It is important to acknowledge that obviously in pregnancy we have got very short window of management, thinking that most of the detection happens around 20 weeks. Then obviously we've got only a few weeks to play with. If we think about how long we've gone since first amniocentesis for fetal prenatal diagnosis was described, that was in 1960. We have gone through different changes in terms of how we interrogate genetic material, in terms of fetal karyotype, fetal chromosomal microarray, and recently, thanks to new generation sequencing, fetal exome sequencing and fetal genome sequencing. Current pathway for a majority of babies with structural abnormalities, fetuses with structural abnormalities, is that after we perform the amnio or CVS, we offer aneuploidies test, which is usually QF-PCR. Diagnostic yield of this test is about 30%. Diagnostic yield means the probability of detecting genetic abnormality for a given method and given phenotype. So if we think about it, 1/3 of the fetuses which are referred with abnormalities will have aneuploidy. The next step is chromosomal microarray, which looks at copy number variants and has got additional diagnostic yield of 6%. Sometimes parallel to it or after a chromosomal microarray is prenatal exome sequencing, which is looking for misspelling mistakes. and additional diagnostic yield depending on the preselected phenotypes is about 6 to 80%. We used to do karyotype after QF-PCR. Less and less we do this. It is still performed for some indications. It still has got good place. However, majority of cases would go for chromosomal microarray unless otherwise indicated. What is R21 test? So R21 test uses a sequencing of the exome, and the exome is built by protein coding regions, which are exons. This is about 2% of our genome, and this 2% of our genome is responsible for disease-causing variants for more than 85% of them. If we think about R21, although all genes are sequenced, only some genes are analyzed, and these genes are collectively known as fetal anomalies panel. It comprises about 1,200 genes, and they are chosen because they have been associated with specific fetal phenotypes.
You're on mute.
Can't hear you, Kasia.
Kasia, you've gone on to mute.
Now?
That's good.
It can be seen on the panel app can be viewed on internet through this website. All genes are specified here, which are tested when we send material for.
Gone on mute again, Kasia.
Yes, I know that. 1 second. Is it now better? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the inclusion criteria for R21 are babies with multiple major structural abnormalities, which are detected on fetal ultrasound where monogenic malformation disorder is likely. And monogenic means that the condition is caused by variants in a single gene. Example of this would be skeletal dysplasia, some kidney disease, brain abnormalities, multiple contractures, nuchal translucency, with the caveat that it needs to be large and it needs to include some additional abnormalities with normal microarray, non-immune fetal hydrops, abnormalities of corpus callosum, mild ventriculomegaly on its own would not be an inclusion. Pregnancies of consanguineous couples will be an inclusion if they have abnormalities, because we know that the chances for monogenic abnormality is higher there, and recurrences of particular fetal abnormalities in pregnancies of the same couple that they do not strictly fulfill the above criteria. A few months ago, also small for gestational age was included, with the caveat that there is no evidence of placental insufficiency. Similarly, short, long bones, again, when there is no evidence of placental insufficiency. So the test is for ongoing pregnancies, where genetic diagnosis might influence management of the ongoing pregnancy, and not when there is imminent fetal loss or termination of pregnancy or miscarriage. It is for rapid urgent cases. For other cases, there are other tests which are more appropriate. What is not included for R21 are minor markers of aneuploidy, or pathogenic copy number variants on other tests. Also, if the baby shows particular abnormalities which fit with different diseases, then other tests are more appropriate. When we have familial causative variants, we will look for those as opposed to sending for R21. In terms of fetal growth restriction, this is excluded, and where termination of pregnancy has been decided, these pregnancies are also excluded. Couple of points which are outside of these main considerations are some additional things which I thought might be important to acknowledge. One of them is fully multidisciplinary care after the patient who comes to fetal medicine and has baby with structural abnormalities. So the fetal medicine or MRI specialist will look after this patient together with clinical genetics, with clinical scientists, with pediatric specialists, to basically meet patient expectations and help patient through the journey in their pregnancy. The team involves midwives, MCAs, counselors, and support. When we have a pregnancy, when we think that the condition would fulfill criteria for R21, we send it to testing laboratory, which again very much depends on that laboratory because it depends on their capacity, but also they review the criteria again and can advise if the case fulfills the criteria or not. If the case does not fulfill the criteria in their view, then there is clinical oversight group where the case can be referred if the clinical team feels strongly that it should be otherwise. What is and what is not reported. So reported are pathogenic and likely pathogenic variants which explain fetal phenotype. What is not reported are variants of uncertain significance and incidental findings. Those actually go usually under MDT discussion, and final decision if they are reported or not reported is taken. What is again very important here is that the analysis is best when it's performed for trio, meaning baby, mother, and the father. This way we have the highest diagnostic yield and the lowest number of variants of unknown significance. When we have material from both parents and the proband, then particularly for variants of unknown significance, they can be checked with the parents, and many of them can be filtered out. So a number of variants of significance of unknown significance for trio is 6.1%, while proband only is 15%. The limitations of the test are that the phenotype might be not complete or not described. The limitations are also associated with new generation sequencing method. As every method, it has got its limitations. Very important is that the couple understand that although all genes are sequenced, only some genes are analyzed. So it is important that negative result does not exclude underlying genetic cause of the phenotype. There are overlapping indications with some other tests which might be more appropriate to be sent for. And the time in pregnancy is of essence because we have very small window to provide diagnosis, to take patient through this journey. Although in gestation the test can be done at any point in pregnancy, it needs to be where it will influence clinical management. And if it is too late in pregnancy, we might not get the result on time before the baby is born. And if we factor into it that there might be different circumstances of this patient, so they might present late. They might be from some more rural areas. They might present first to their local hospital because they need to have a transport. They need to have someone who will take them to the hospital. They might have kids who need to go to school, and all these factors come into play here. This might mean that we might see them after 30 weeks, and particularly when they are seen after 35, 36 weeks, this gives us very small window of opportunity, and the case might just be too late for the result to reach before the baby is born. It is also important to acknowledge how long it takes in the lab because of how the test is. itself, so it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. Depends, it is done once per week at the moment, to my knowledge, so it depends on which day the material is sent. If it is sent on the next day after the test was set, then it needs to wait a week to be processed. So all this means that the window of opportunity is really quite significant here, and very unique situation. In pregnancy, that's the only really such a unique situation for the management. I put a couple of points in terms of counseling, although Fleur might have more on R21 counseling. We also developed a very good pack for counseling, which is being put on East Genomics website as we speak. So it is a resource which is worth having a look. When we counsel patient, the patient needs to be made aware that a test includes genes which are linked to fetal abnormality detected by imaging and will not detect developmental delay or autism. There are limitations of prenatal imaging. There are implications for the family, potentially non-paternity, non-maternity, and consanguinity will be revealed through this test. So all cases of egg or sperm donation, as well as other situations, will be revealed through this test, and the patient needs to know about it. We did have cases where patients did not want to proceed with further testing. The patient needs to know that there is a chance for uncertain findings, which we cannot explain with the current knowledge. And there is a chance for unexpected results which are not related to why the test was done in the first place. Very important is for the patients to acknowledge that no pathogenic variant identified result does not exclude underlying gene problem. So that's main sort of topic explained. Now I've got a couple of questions. So if we have situation like this, Mr. and Mrs. Smith has scanned at 12 weeks, which showed that the nuchal is increased of 4.5 millimeters. There are no other abnormalities. What would you do? Would you congratulate the couple, reassure and send home, or discuss associations of increased nuchal, offer CVS, QF-PCR and microarray, or discuss associations of increased nuchal, offer CVS, QF-PCR, microarray, and counsel about R21 as increased NT is an inclusion criterion for R21? And the answers, I hope everybody put this answer. Nuchal translucency is not indication for R21 on its own. Now, the same couple comes back later, and on the subsequent scan at 20 weeks, there are some other structural abnormalities like enlarged cisterna magna, cerebellar vermian agenesis, ventriculomegaly, and enlarged cystic kidneys. What would you do? Reassure the couple, the QF-PCR and microarray did not detect genetic cause. Or offer the couple additional imaging scans. They are not eligible for further genetic genomic testing. Or counsel the couple about R21 as there is a high chance that the referral will be accepted for the above indications. Fetal DNA stored from first trimester CVS can be used here. And the answer is, I hope everybody got that right. Yes, there are several abnormalities which might be related to monogenic cause. Question 3. Mrs. Jones missed her regular antenatal scans and attended for her first scan at 24 weeks. There are some abnormalities on the scan, including micrognathia, polydactyly, and polycystic kidneys. What would you do? Would you reassure Mrs. Jones these are only minor problems, or inform Mrs. Jones that no further investigations are indicated as she is already over 24 weeks and not eligible for termination of pregnancy should major genetic problem be found? Or inform Mrs. Jones that this is the case of multiple fetal abnormalities, offer invasive testing and QF-PCR microarray, discuss chance of being eligible for R21. This referral can be made at any stage of pregnancy where it would have impact on pregnancy management and outcome. And that's the correct answer. Correct answer was number 3. That's all from me. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, you can find me on this email. Yes, and once more, I would like to say watch the space, because on our website on East Genomics, there will be quite a few resources to help with counseling for R21.
Thank you, Kasia. That was brilliant.
So hi, my name's Lauren and I'm the Midwifery project lead for the Fetal Maternal project, exploring the equity of access to rapid prenatal sequencing in the East region. In addition, I am a fetal medicine midwife. So today we're going to look at an overview of the presentation, which is going to be discussing the aims of the project and share an overview of some of the key findings and introduce the project outputs. So firstly, I wanted to outline the role of the East GMSA for those who might not be aware. So the East GMSA has been set up to ensure all eligible patients across the East Midlands and East England can access and benefit from appropriate genomic tests when required, providing high quality and personalised treatment. And that's kind of the reason why we're doing this project, is to look at some of those aspects within the R21 pathway. So this is our team. There's 6 of us, but we've also been very lucky and very fortunate to have additional expert input from Jessica Myring, Principal Prenatal Counsellor and Prenatal Lead at the University of Leicester Hospitals, and Kathy Mann, Lead Clinical Scientist at Cambridge University Hospitals. The project was used self-reporting questionnaires sent to all of the East GMSA region maternity units to explore their fetal medicine provision, collecting data on team structure, stakeholder engagement, acuity, training, and patient and family support. This data was then used to develop a strategic approach to improve equity of access within the region. So this is a map of the region with the hospitals on there. There are 16 hospitals in total. There are 4 tertiary units and 1 secondary unit, which is served by tertiary outreach. There are 6 secondary units which have fetal medicine units within them, and then 5 units without fetal medicine services. For those of you who are not familiar with the differences between tertiary and secondary level fetal medicine, tertiary units are commissioned to provide specific set or specialist fetal medicine services. They receive triage referrals from both secondary fetal medicine and units without fetal medicine services. And in both tertiary and secondary units, the specialist services can vary quite a lot due to these different commissioning arrangements within the region. In terms of R21, most are sent from tertiary units, but it's important to know that we all need to understand this R21 pathway to enable good support for the service users, which is why I'm so pleased we've got so many people here today. So the key findings: through a thematic analysis of the results from the questionnaires, we identified some themes, and there was a lot of variance in service delivery. For example, staffing combinations, time allocated for a fetal medicine appointment, and the clinicians responsible for consenting and giving results for the R21 testing. There was also significant variance in the number of microarrays and R21s requested within the groups between tertiary centres and also between secondary units. Clinicians felt that there were also limited access to subject-specific training and resources, and it was evident that resources that support triaging cases for the R21 inclusion-exclusion criteria would be useful. So this chart is looking at the acuity and in the fetal medicine units, and on the left you've got the tertiary units and on the right secondary units. So this looks at the number of PAs, which is the programmed activity, which is a unit of time that a doctor is given for a particular specialism, and this is the number of PAs per unit. It's a busy slide, I don't need you to understand everything on it, but from looking at it, I think you can agree that there is a variance between all of the units. None of them are the same, in both tertiary units and secondary units. And this is likely to be due for a combination of factors, probably to do with commissioning variations, who is seen within the fetal medicine services, and also the time allocated for appointments within the individual units. Moving on to staffing composition. You can see here that this demonstrates that there is a variation in the staffing composition. What I'd like you to appreciate is that there is no standard approach to staffing in a fetal medicine unit, and that each is staffed slightly differently. For example, the majority of units have core fetal medicine midwives, and they're in dark grey here, while some only use rotational midwives, and they are illustrated in light grey, and some use a combination. Some did not have access to maternity care assistants, which could support the running of units, and some tertiary units have research specialists while others don't. Looking at the time allocated for a fetal medicine appointment, and during this fetal medicine appointment, this is usually when a scan is performed and then there's a consultation with the patient and sometimes an invasive procedure. You can see that there is a wide variation in the time given for a scan appointment, with the majority of tertiary units giving 1 hour for the first appointment compared to secondary units, where the majority of units allow for 30 minutes for their first appointment. I do wonder if this variation does affect how people are offered testing and triaging for the R21. Moving on to genetics conversations and who has those conversations. I think this chart demonstrates the multidisciplinary approach that we have between genetics and fetal medicine units. And this is beneficial for our service users. But if we look closely at the grey boxes, you can see that midwives are happy to discuss general genetic testing, but this is not reflected in the R21 consenting in one unit. This highlights a focus for training and strategy. It's likely that midwives are involved in these other areas, but perhaps not quite as confidently as general genetics conversations. Moving on to this chart where we're looking at the number of tests that have been recorded. This demonstrates the acuity really of the microarrays and the R21s for the period between the 1st of April 2021 and the 31st of March 2022. I would like to focus your attention firstly on the 4 fetal medicine units on the left, which are the tertiary centres. It's not surprising that there is generally a larger number of invasive tests at these centres because of the more complex abnormalities that are referred there for assessment and testing. If we look at Leicester, for example, the data shows the highest number of microarrays, but interestingly, a significantly sort of lower number in comparison to the number of microarrays for R21 tests. I wonder if this could be possibly due to the types of abnormality detected during this time frame, or perhaps due to data collection issues. Perhaps patients who could have access to R21 testing may not have had it offered. The only way to find out this information would be for internal audits of all fetal medicine cases, which would be extremely timely. Currently, there is no recommendation for auditing cases to ensure those eligible for R21 testing have been offered testing, but perhaps it should be something that we consider. Looking at the R21 within the secondary units, you can see that there have been some R21 sent, which is actually not the sort of suggested protocol from the National Genomics Test Directory. It was unclear from these ones whether or not they had had input from tertiary fetal medicine units in these cases. And many fetal medicine units had challenges providing this data for this part of the questionnaire. As you can see from the chart, the number of R21s accepted by units, reported by units, that's in orange, versus the number of R21s requested, which is in red, which is reported by Great Ormond Street, were different for the same time period. This may well be due to challenges of collecting this data, as there's no standardised approach. So moving on to our project outputs. You can see on the left is the at-a-glance guide for the R21 inclusion/exclusion criteria, and this is to support clinicians to triage which cases may meet the criteria for R21 testing and then go on to the testing pathway. And on the right is the testing pathway and checklist designed to support clinicians to ensure that all the steps of the testing pathway are completed. And these documents are available currently on the East GMSA website with the usual caveats for use within your trusts. We've also developed an e-learning resource specifically for rapid prenatal exome sequencing. This is currently being finalised and hopefully available soon. And the lunch and learn today, and thank you all for coming. We also looked into how service users could give feedback specifically within fetal medicine units, as many fetal medicine units did not have mechanisms for effective user feedback. We're inspired by Nottingham's use of the Friends and Family test, and we have run pilots within the tertiary unit and secondary unit to look at the feasibility of using the NHS Friends and Family test. And we aim to share a how-to document on how other units could, within the East region, be able to facilitate this within their trusts, if that's something that they thought would be useful. And then we've also developed a spreadsheet for data collection, and this is something that is a Excel spreadsheet that has drop downs to reduce time spent on data entry with running totals for R21 to make it easier to see running totals. They're also editable, so you can customize it to the unit's needs by removing cells, etc. And that should be up on our website soon. And we're also developing a network, and that's being set up. Hopefully, will be up and running soon. This aims to be a multi-professional space for shared learning and support. And in summary, there was evidence of good practice within our region, but there are challenges that all units face while delivering rapid prenatal exome sequencing. Resources and training could aid clinicians to improve the equity of access to the R21 test. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's continued to support families through this pathway and those who have supported this project. Thank you. Any questions? You can either email them to me or you can ask them to me now.
Marching on, I would like to hand you over to Fleur now. Fleur, would you like me to share your slides?
So my talk is on the women's experience and how all this testing affects them emotionally and psychologically, and that comes down to our counselling. I want to give the background outcomes. My introduction here is I'm Fleur, and I'm lead midwife for fetal medicine, and I've been in this post over the last 6 years. I work with a team of 5 fetal medicine consultants, 1 subspec and 4 specialist midwives and 3 specialist MCAs. We work in a tertiary unit and we have between 150 and 170 new referrals per month, and we have 7 referring hospitals across the East Anglia. And our aim is to provide holistic women-centred care for all these families that are facing some of the greatest challenges of their lives. Do you want to move on? So for my master's, I conducted a research project which covered the psychological impact of antenatal screening, diagnostic genetic diagnosis and structural abnormalities. And I just wanted to do an overview on the advances of screening over the last 2 decades, which Kasia has gone through beautifully. But we're familiar with CBS's amniocentesis. And on top of that, in the recent years, we've got NIPT, NIPD, and now TRIO and duo exome sequencing. Soon we're about to introduce sequencing of the newborn infant. All this research confirms there's an inextricable link between the engagement in the screening process, levels of anxiety, and the psychological impact it has on women and the well-being of their fetus. As the FAST guidelines say, we are responsible to inform without causing harm to mother and baby. And we need to keep this in mind when we're offering further tests. Screen 5, please. A key aspect of my role is counselling women who have been presented with unexpected results from screening from the first trimester, second trimester, and their scan findings, and late unexpected diagnosis from routine growth scans. And I come to counselling and the R21 consent conversation, relying on my experience as a midwife and the background knowledge that I have from the research that I conducted for my dissertation. Speaking to women and their families who are willingly engaged in screening, there is a theme that they never believed that they would be the parents that would be given bad news or unexpected findings. They're being asked to make life-changing decisions that they're not expecting to make, and they don't feel prepared for them. They struggle with the ongoing screening process, with the waiting times, and having agency in the screening process, and the psychological anxieties, because all the time they're having these investigations, we're asking them to think, make decisions that they never thought they would have to make. And I can't stress enough the psychological impact that this screening process has on them. These two screens that you see next are examples from the responses that I had during my research, and they are very impactful. We can look at a few of them. One says, we arrived for screening and then we had to come back a few weeks later and spend so much time worrying about what could go wrong. The not knowing and the anxiety in this time was the hardest time to deal with. And they are relevant to the women and how they feel. When we're looking at even more investigations on top of what we might think as professionals as routine testing of CVSs and amnio. And then there's this whole other layer of further investigations. And they demonstrate, these quotes, the importance of good counselling, the importance of giving realistic overviews and result timelines to the women. The following example sums up this woman's experience. She said, it was very scary. It was the worst time of our lives, compounded by the time between the tests, and then again the speed of the tests. So women engage in screening, and they want the investigations. And there's a real conflict between how quickly we do these and how quickly they can absorb and process the information that we are giving them. They become overwhelmed with the amount of information that they're given, and they feel under pressure to make decisions that they still are not equipped to make. And as a practitioner, we're obliged to give timely results in order that the women have the opportunity to make informed choices. This could be a decision between continuing or interrupting a much wanted pregnancy. There is conflict here, and the remedy to this is to listen to the women, to be guided by their needs. Every woman is an individual, and they are not just another part of a screening process. We can't change the results, but never underestimate the importance of your counselling and how your words make these women feel on their journey, and how it relates not only to this pregnancy, but to future pregnancies. The relevance of R21, and we can see here, I'm just going to move that out of the way. The women are given results, and they can be given a result for a definite or definitive diagnosis, inherited disease. And what does that mean for them? So does that mean that every baby that they have is going to be affected? What are they going to do in this pregnancy? is this pregnancy viable, or is it going to have a life-limiting disease? These major questions that women are faced with at that time. Is this a de novo event? So this is a new event in their pregnancies. But does that relieve their anxiety that in the next pregnancy that it'll be all right, or will there be another de novo event? And findings of unknown significance. What does that mean for them? And what does it mean for future pregnancies? And where have these variants come from? They feel, are they responsible for them? Have they done something wrong? And again, it's that agency that they are being asked to make decisions. And if there is no findings, as Kasia said in her talk, this doesn't mean that there isn't a genetic underlying cause. And what are they going to do going forward with this pregnancy? All of this happens within a time of 21 days, which to them miserably feels like a lifetime. And they really need support during. Women are shown to distance themselves emotionally from the fact that they are pregnant and from their fetuses until they receive results, and in some cases even till a baby is born. And this has been referred to as a tentative pregnancy. The consenting conversation. So this conversation is not merely getting parents to sign a form agreeing to further testing. The purpose of this is to ensure that parents have an understanding of the implications for this pregnancy and future pregnancies, and for their extended family. There are two forms that, as midwives, if you're doing this consent conversation, you need to be familiar with. And Kasia covered all of the points in this form, that it will reveal the paternity of the children. There may be findings that don't relate to the scan findings or the abnormalities that we have seen, and we don't understand that. It might give them that diagnosis, but there is still remains uncertainty of their future. A midwife needs to be an advocate for the woman, to give them information without being directive of what the woman should do. And the women's decisions are never made in isolation. They're made with their family background, their culture, their religion, and their ethnicity in mind. And never underestimate the impact of your counselling. The next slide, please. So the take-home message for all practitioners is that you need to ensure that the R21 is offered as the right test to the right patient and at the right time. It needs, for understanding the level of anxiety that is caused by the screening process and the process that they're going through at this time. They need understanding for the increased anxiety by yet another test on top of the test that they've already, to ensure the families have sufficient time to process the information. And it's really important to manage the expectations of the results and the reporting times. Women have reported that they need to have an overview so that they can manage their own emotions and expectations, not only just for them, but for their partners and their family. And the need to provide ongoing contact, counselling, reassurance during this waiting period. Next slide. Thank you for listening, and these are my contact details, and if you have any further question, then please do come back to me. Thank you.
And we want to continue through the Women and Families Pathway, and So Anita Davis, who's the information officer at Unique, is going to tell us a little bit about her role and Unique's valuable role in the continuing care of the women and the families. So Anita, if you'd like to present.
Hi there. So as Annette said, I'm Anita and I work with Unique Charity. I'm just going to share my screen, if you bear with me one moment. Okay, so just start off saying my name's Anita and I'm an information officer at the Unique, which is a rare chromosome and gene support group. So just a brief bit about me. I've been working for Unique for the last 20 months. I'm previously worked as a midwife in antenatal screening department, where I was giving support and counselling to families with abnormal results during their pregnancy. So at Unique, my role is to provide support and information to members and offer contacts to meet other like families. A lot of this work is done by email, but we do also speak to some of our members on the phone. So just a brief bit about who we are at Unique. We are a registered charity, so it has no government funding and we do rely solely on public donations. We are a small team of 8 people. We do work remotely, but we are based in Oxford. Currently, we have approximately 30,000 members worldwide. And Unique's mission is to inform, support and alleviate the isolation of anyone affected by a rare chromosome or single gene disorder. And we also aim to raise public awareness of these conditions. So this slide's a little bit out of date, but it's just useful to show how rapidly our membership has grown since we were founded. So we anticipate that the number of families signing up to us will only continue to accelerate as each new genetic testing initiative comes out. So currently at Unique, we join between 150 to 200 members every month. Approximately 2 to 3 of these members will have joined as they've received a prenatal diagnosis. So what makes our members unique? So a chromosomal gene disorder can impact health and development in many ways. For many of our unique families, development delay or a medical condition may be the first sign that their baby or child has been affected. Although now I've just said that we do have a lot of members joining us who receive a prenatal diagnosis or even after experiencing multiple miscarriages. So common features of our members at Unique include some degree of intellectual impairment, communication problems and challenging behaviours. Our members may also have a different understanding of the world around them. So this slide, the impact of diagnosis. So at the bottom of the slide here, you can see a massive great array result. And many of the conditions that we support at Unique do not have names. They are just a massive jumble of numbers and letters, which is often very hard to explain to friends and family and parents themselves. So our members have duplications, deletions or single gene disorders, or even a mixture of all of these. Sorry, I know there's different people on the call, but just to explain that the duplication means there's a extra piece of genetic material. Deletion means that there's a piece of genetic material missing, and the single gene disorder means that there is a spelling change in a genetic material. So one of the aims of Unique is to put all this genetic information into everyday terms and make it a little bit less daunting for families. So what we can offer Unique families. Unique membership is free and it's open to all. We provide information guides specific to particular diagnoses, as well as more general and practical day-to-day living guides. We also have a regular magazine and e-news updates. Obviously, it's impossible for such a small charity to cover every possible diagnosis. So where we don't have appropriate information or there's already a disorder-specific group set up, then we may refer signpost members on to them. We also provide emotional support in the form of a helpline and social media groups. And crucially, it can provide contact details of families with the same or similar diagnosis, or to families who live nearby and are going through similar experiences. We also organise fun family days and events as regularly as possible and as funds allow, so that families actually get to support each other and meet in person. All of our members will be offered to join our private Facebook group. This can enable members to share personal details and get each advice from other unique members. The groups are monitored by the staff when contribute where we can, but this stage is essentially for members to vent and share their experiences in a supportive environment. The public social media page allows Unique to share our work and attracts new members and supporters and raise awareness of our life with rare chromosomes or gene disorders and highlight the support that Unique offers. So we have a bespoke database which has a vast amount of information contributed directly from our families. The database was launched in 1996. And unsurprisingly, families had a clear desire for information about the lifetime consequences of their rare conditions and wanted to find others with similar disorders. There is therefore a vast amount of information kept on our database, and we can provide anonymised phenotype reports for professionals to aid with counselling and appointments. Unique also acts as a link between researchers and families, and crucially, the database plays a huge role in our disorder-specific information guides that we produce. At Unique, we have over 250 disorder guides, which are all available free on the website, and you can download and print them. The guides provide information on medical concerns, also areas such as growth, feeding, learning, behaviour and speech. Where possible, and as our membership has matured, we also try to provide information on puberty and adulthood. Some of these guides have also been translated into different languages. We currently have 21 different languages that have been translated by our professional volunteers. More recently, we also have available on the Unique website My Chromosome Story Guides. So these guides are picture books and mainly aimed at children, but also can be used for other family members to understand genetic differences. Some of these are also available in different languages. And as well as written information, we also have recently launched jargon busting videos, which is on our Unique website, which is just another platform to try and share information. As already mentioned, we do also now have regular families contacting us who receive a diagnosis during their pregnancy, and we try to offer as much information as we can. So last year I wrote a prenatal genetic testing and diagnosis guide to try and help families understand the prenatal testing pathway. And this guide is available on the Unique website, and the link is available at the end of the slides. Unique also has a number of practical support guides to offer help with many different resources in them. These range from sleep problems to what to expect during a genetic appointment, behaviour problems, advocacy, and many more. Many of these guides were compiled by a former colleague at Unique who has an adult disabled son. So as a carer herself, she knows only too well the challenges that are faced every day and how invaluable practical day-to-day support and resources can be. So what next? I really hope that I've been able to give you some idea of the services that we can provide at Unique to families and professionals, and hope that you might consider joining us. Refer your patients to us and contact with any of your queries, as well as considering helping to promote and fundraise for us. You might also be able to help with writing and translating or verifying any of our guides. And as hope is clear, we are only a tiny charity, and with continued support of professionals, we can continue our invaluable sources, which I hope you agree are invaluable. So here is a list of the resources that I have talked about during the slides. And that's about it from me. So if you do have any questions.